The Introvert's Edge podcast was designed to create a dialogue around introversion, to stimulate a discussion around our disadvantages, how we overcome those disadvantages, and what we consider our introvert's edge. Together, we're finally going to confront the stigma around introversion, showing that we're not second-class citizens, we're just different, and we need to embrace that. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Introvert's Edge podcast. I'm ecstatic to have our next guest with us, and I have to admit this is a curveball to most people I bet that are going to be listening, but Karen Morgan is actually a comedian. She was discovered on Nickelodeon's search for the funniest mum in America. She's got nearly 200,000 followers on Instagram. She's got a post literally about introversion that went viral, and she speaks all over the US, but funnily enough, she was actually an attorney in her earlier life, so I feel like this is going to be a really interesting interview, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, Matthew, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, you and I we spoke quite considerably beforehand, because I kind of said to people, like I said to you, that no one's going to believe you're an introvert. I mean, you are on stage doing comedy, which, I mean, just between me and you, I can't think of anything worse for someone like me. So, I speak from stage, but I it's funny, and you tend to guide yourself in some similar ways to me, and I can't wait to get into that. But I really want you to help people believe that this person that I'm looking at that just seems so calm being on camera right now, and also that speaks from stage, help me understand this introverted journey that you had. Like, did you realize at a certain point you were introverted, or did you just always know, and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Well, I think I've always known it, but I don't think we have in the past, when I was in high school and college, called it. I think we identify it a little bit better now these days. You can, I follow different introvert podcasts and different introvert Instagram accounts and that sort of thing. Back in the day, nobody really called it that. They called it shy, or they called it something different. So I've embraced it, and it does as a stand-up comic. I do get comments all the time, including on that viral video. There's no way you can be an introvert. You're a stand-up comic. Stand-up comics can't be introverted. Well, they can. I am. One of my favorite comics, who's brilliant, Stephen Wright. He's very introverted. He's a good friend, and he's a really an introverted person. It doesn't matter what line of work you're in. Introverts are everywhere. Everybody's doing a lot of different jobs.
I think that's really important for people to hear, because I agree with you. I think that introverts can do everything. As a matter of fact, and we'll get into this, I believe that introverts actually have an advantage because of the fact that they find things slightly difficult perhaps at the beginning. But I think that a lot of people do perhaps think they're shy when they're actually introverted, and they're totally different things. I guess one of the things that I would ask though is, how did you find your way into comedy, and was that an issue for you because you felt introverted and like that was a barrier to entry for you, or did you just blow past it? Like, what happened there?
Well, I have to start out with the caveat that I didn't start doing stand-up until I was 40. I also was a mother of 3 small children. So there became a little bit of having been a mom to children, the fear of other things is not as big anymore, as you're already a mom. So how bad can this be? I think I kind of threw it at the wall, like, how bad could this be? I've already had 3 kids. Which also led to sort of my comedy material and why I got into comedy. But going back to when I was practicing law and was a trial attorney, I think I felt the introversion a little bit more. My biggest fear in the courtroom was looking foolish. I think that was my top fear of all time. Was I was getting up in front of a jury and or judge and arguing cases and that sort of thing, and my biggest thing was I didn't want to look foolish. So that was my fear. So I over prepared every case. I over prepared every argument. So then when I got to doing stand-up comedy, which in a way is harder than practicing law, some people don't understand this either. I kind of approached it as a very preparedness sort of way. Like if I'm prepared before I go on stage, I can take away some of that anxiety that I would have otherwise.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that a lot of people feel that, actually, I've seen a lot of those trial attorney TV shows where, and I know they blow that out of proportion, but those people seem to be just dynamic. They just get up with very little preparation and they do it. And I think people think that about sales and public speakers, and if somebody's doing that, they must just have that natural ability. And it sounds like you protected yourself through huge amounts of planning and preparation to make sure that when you were on stage, that while there was, or should I say, when you were in the courtroom, while there was things that were outside your control, in a lot of ways, you'd controlled most of the variables so that it was likely going to fall within this kind of space as opposed to such a broad thing that was uncontrollable.
Yeah, that's very true. And I always tell young comics, control what you can. And the number one thing you can control is how prepared you are. And that's for any job, quite honestly. That's not stand-up comedy or practicing law, but you can control how prepared you are, how rested you are. Have you shown up on time to the meeting, or are you late? And that's adding anxiety. So I tell young comics, show up early, bring your own snack, bring your own bottle of water. Don't show up and expect other people to help you with stuff. Control what you can. And that takes away this as much of it as you can. Now, there's certain things you can't control. You can't control if there's a drunk person in the audience, or you can't control if if it's hot in the room. There's certain things you cannot control, but control what you can, and the majority of that is in your purview. You can do it.
Interesting. So I'm interested to find out about your energy levels, like on stage and after speaking on stage. And the reason for that is I found myself, like, when I didn't do as much planning and preparation, or even when I didn't know how to do that successfully, there was a lot of energy wasted. And I'm saying wasted because it was catastrophizing and ruminating on what was going to go wrong. And then when I got on stage, I found myself being super energetic and actually enjoying myself after a while. But then over time, like, I could answer questions, and then I would sit down, and I kind of felt like I've been skydiving, right? Like, that energy level has just gone off. Like, have you found, because you speak all over America and you're in multiple places all the time, and it seems like your agenda is very energetic. And I mean, I know you will work on your fitness. Like, does that play a part of it? Like, have you found that do you find a similar thing with your energy, or is it different for you?
Well, I think I call it protecting the creative energy. I have to protect my energy. So if I'm on stage, as you said, you get a little kick, you get some adrenaline, you get it going. But then I find after the show, I'm going to go back to my hotel room and, like, literally watch TV and protect myself. I also protect my energy leading up to it. And so I try to take a nap before a show. I try to sit quietly in my hotel room. I'm certainly not going to go out to dinner with people before. A lot of times I'll do shows and they'll say, "Hey, would you come to dinner with us before the show? We'd love to," and I know that will suck out my energy. My social battery will suck out before I even am performing. So I do have to be super protective of my creative energy and I call it performance energy. And, I've only got enough room, so many minutes of that in a day. So, as opposed to people who are extroverted and they're on all the time. And I think that they get energy from interacting with people. Whereas for me, I find sometimes, and not in a bad way, but other people suck out my energy. So I have to be protective of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, you need to understand your energy. And I have people, like, it's so weird. Like, people always want to ask me questions just before I go up on stage. And so I have to tell people to protect me from that, because for 5 minutes to 10 minutes, I'm just rehearsing my first line over and over and over again. Because that's the part that's uncomfortable. And then, which we're going to get into, I get into storytelling, and I tell a story from stage, so that, I mean, the science behind that is it actually activates the reticular activating system of the brains of the listeners and the teller. I feel automatically comfortable. And I know that you tell a ton of stories yourself. And, it's interesting because a lot of introverts think that they're not funny, and they have this thing called dry humor, they'll say, which is why they keep it only for their family and friends. Yet you've kind of made a career out of dry humor, not being that kind of set up with punchline, but more that storytelling kind of focus. So I was like, I knew this was going to be a good interview, because you literally think the exact same way I do. You're just doing it I don't even know it could be done in that kind of comedy framework. Yeah. So I'd love for you to share with people a little bit about kind of the way you think through your set, because I feel like you keep telling me it's actually more about the behind what happens on stage and the planning and the preparation and the writing and to create these great stories so that I don't have to be dynamic on stage. So I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit more about that.
So when I do a set, so right now I'm doing about an hour. So it's an hour worth of material, and in comedy we call it a set list. So it's basically a bullet point list, and I'm going chronological in my set list in my head, but it's got to be in my head before I get on stage. Now some comics work off the fly; they do crowd work, and they're going off their set list. I'm pretty prepared, but looking at comics that are very prepared sounds like they've just thought of it, right? So, but they've actually been working on it for some time. I want to go back quickly to you talking about people talking to you before you get on stage and how you need to protect it. There's something in comedy. There's the green room where all the comics are backstage, and what tends to happen in the green room sometimes is that comics are one-upping each other. They're trying to be funny for each other, and and I find it so draining. And I try not to. I don't want people to think I'm rude, but I physically can't be around that energy before I go on stage. It's going to mess me up. So I will I'll find a corner and get a Coke to drink and hang out by myself in a little quiet area, because I find that that's a social drain for me before I go on stage. Because when you get on stage, this, Matthew, that you're going to tell a story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. You've got to get through it. You've got to hit your highlights. And as you're going through it, you do get energized because the audience is with you. You see the nods, and so they give you energy. And I think this was one thing that I was missing. I did a lot of Zoom shows during the pandemic, and some of the Zoom shows had volume and some of them didn't. I couldn't hear if the people were laughing. I couldn't hear. I could barely see faces, and it was so draining to me, because when you're in front of a live audience, those people give you energy back. So whether you're introverted or extroverted, you need that energy exchange from the live audience.
That's interesting. I have a question on this, and it's not to do with introversion. I'm just interested. So I had to speak virtually as well during that COVID period. Did you learn anything during that period? Like, did you become a better comedian during that period? Did you find that when you came back you were less good, or it drained your energy more? Like, help me understand that.
My experience was a little bit different. I did not find that it made me a better stand-up. In fact, it didn't help me at all, because the medium that from which we were working in a camera, like we're talking today, was very different than being in a theater or a hall or whatever with a lot of people. What was great for me during pandemic was I learned to create content in my office or in my yard or in my home, which was just me and a camera. I started doing these voiceovers that the voiceover things were great, because I was voicing my voice over another video, this lady that was doing cooking, and she's a British cook, and I was giving her a Southern voice, and I just did it because I was bored. But what I found was, oh, this is great, because as an introvert, I don't even have to be on camera. It gave me a whole new set of content that I was not prepared for. So I learned that in terms of what did I learn during the pandemic. I learned I don't like Zoom shows, and I do like voiceover work. And I did one Zoom show that was in webinar mode, so I couldn't even see faces. I could hear nothing. It was like me talking to my wall in my office for an hour. And I remember I left my office and went in my kitchen and laid down on the floor and just laid there for like 30 minutes, because I was so drained at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're basically just giving energy and getting nothing back for
Yeah.
an hour. And like, I understand, like, I know my stories and I know how people respond to them. So, and I've done it for so long that I actually don't mind them being over camera. And I actually got better at the craft. Like, I found like I became more emotive and I had to be more focused on
Yeah.
where I was standing. So I'd move from this camera to that camera. But
Right.
in something like comedy where you don't know whether they're responding well or not, yeah, I can imagine that would be tough.
Yeah.
I am excited about what you said though, because what I heard, I mean, you've had viral videos, but your viral videos were, kind of are after some of these initial works that you did when COVID first happened. And I always wonder whether or not it would have happened without that initial work. And I doubt it. But what I am excited about is what I heard with everybody is kind of one-upping each other in the green room. I go and find my own place.
Yes.
I, during COVID, realized that this part I couldn't stand, but this part worked for me. What I'm seeing is somebody that is making decisions about how to engage in the career that they're in. Is there a
Yes.
way that you mentally do that? Are you like stumbling into that, or are you making these decisions and being more methodical about how you manage your energy?
I think I have become more aware of it, of saying to myself, "Hey, I need to protect this energy." And I have a woman that I consult with, and I met her during COVID. She was on TikTok, and I was trying to learn TikTok, so I met her in this Facebook group, and she and I have become friends. And I talk to her now, and one of the things I've learned from her is, you know, recognize that you need to take the time away to protect that energy, whatever it takes, whether it's go for a walk. I'm a swimmer. I'll go for a swim. I love swimming because no one can talk to me. So, go for a bike, take whatever you need to do to protect your energy. So then when the time comes that you need to have performance energy or creative energy in order to write, you've got that battery sort of reset. So, but I have become more aware of it, recognizing that, hey, it's okay for me to go just take a walk right now. It's okay to get up from my desk and go walk around, because this is actually in the long run helping the overall process.
I think that's important. I mean, a lot of people feel guilty about walking away from their desk, or
Yeah.
they would feel guilty about not being part of that banter in the green room.
Oh yeah.
How
Yeah.
do you do you feel guilty when these things happen, or have you found a way to give yourself permission that that's okay?
I think in terms of it, like a green room setting, I feel guilty because I don't want people to think that I'm being aloof or rude or arrogant or whatever, when it's just I can't engage with that. I just physically can't engage with that. So I don't, because I probably, because I'm introverted, I don't hold up a sign and said, I'm going to my safe space over here. I like you all. I love you all, but I'm going to go sit over here now to protect I don't. I just sort of quietly disappear. And I think we're all introverts. We're good at that. We're good at quietly disappearing. And I think if we can recognize why we are quietly disappearing, and also know that it's okay to quietly disappear for that reason, just give ourselves a break. You just have to. Don't feel guilty about it. Like I said, I just don't want people to think I'm being rude. That's my only thing.
Look, I think that the message is powerful, because there are people that are listening to this that perhaps don't give themselves that permission because they feel like they have to, but then they don't perform in that moment that it's necessary. I mean, if
Right.
you were engaging in that banter in the green room and then were terrible on stage, then you wouldn't be accepted by that group anyway, and they wouldn't invite you
Right.
back, and the audience wouldn't like you. So it's
Right.
about really being the best at that time. And what's interesting is I always used to feel bad about it, and then I started making this joke about, and again, everything with me has to have a script and a process, right? Because otherwise, I'm not going to feel comfortable doing it. I used to say to people, now for about 5 minutes before my presentation, I'm going to walk away because I need to rotate the same line in my head to feel comfortable. Because until I get into the story, I'm super uncomfortable. But I don't want you to think it's this introvert that's just run away and they're not coming back. I promise I will be back. And everybody laughs, and it made me instantly feel comfortable. And I
Yeah.
got better at telling it that way. And then
Yeah.
it made such a difference to the way. Do you ever find yourself like not using your introversion as an excuse? And please, if you do, like, feel free to share that. But you're more so explaining it maybe to family members, to friends, so that they understand that what you're doing isn't walking away from them because you're being mean to them, but just because this is your process or something that you need.
Right. I tend to probably say it to my family more, really close people. I don't tell strangers I'm going to do XYZ because I'm introverted. I feel like that that's like almost too much for that. Like that's almost too much of a hurdle for me to take. But my husband knows when we're at a party or whatever, when I'm done, and I'm just like, time to go. He knows me well enough. My kids know me well enough to know that I will say no to different invitations, social invitations, because I just can't. There's also, we talked earlier about, sometimes I will do nonprofit fundraising shows, and generally those things are also corporate events. They'll have a dinner before I speak. And probably you have had this as well. Before you speak, there's a dinner and you're after dinner speaker, and they always want me to come eat dinner. And I just can't do it. And so I just generally say, thank you so much. But I'm going to need to prepare. I don't go into any details, but the reality is if I'm having to talk to someone at a nice table and kind of, socialize before I'm even speaking, my energy level is going to go down a little bit. So I don't say all the words, but that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think saying you need to prepare makes perfect sense as well.
Yeah.
Like what it's saying is, I'm not going to have an enjoyment time with you because I'm doing the work, and I feel
Right.
like people can never get upset with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What I am interested in though, because I mean, you talk about not doing kind of setup comedy, and you talk about preparing stories, and what I think is going to shock a lot of people is you kind of share that a lot of the success that you have is more about the writing than the being on stage.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would assume most extroverts would struggle with that. That's why they do the more stand up and just read the room kind of stuff. But you really leaned into your strengths there. Like, help me understand that, because I mean, one of the questions that I ask all the time is, what do you consider your introvert's edge? And I feel that this answer is going to come up as a response to this question. So help people kind of understand that the planning and preparation that comes into that kind of feeling almost dynamic on stage.
Right. So my writing process, and I've now been doing comedy longer than I practice law. So, and I will continue to do this forever because I am enamored with the writing process of comedy. I just love it. I love the wordsmithing. I love working out different things. But when I start writing what will eventually be a bit on stage, it is generally something I've observed or I've experienced. And so I'll make a note or two, or in the airport, this happened, or my husband did this and I said that, some things like that. I'll keep a note of it, and then I'll gradually, work on it until it becomes something on stage. But this is weeks, months, and sometimes years before it is finally to the way it's done at a full-on show. And so the process for me I'm generally an observational comic, is kind of quietly blending into the into the woodwork and observing people. When I'm traveling, I'm not loud. I have stopped telling people on planes what I do. Because generally they're disappointed, and and then the people who know me, and they say, "Oh, are you the comedian?" And I'll say, "Yes, but I'm not funny in real life," and because they expect something, they expect some sort of, extroverted behavior. So people are constantly disappointed in me in real life because I'm a little different. I'm just quieter. But when I'm traveling, or if I'm observing, or if I'm taking notes on something that's going to eventually be a bit, I am getting gritty details. As a quiet observer, you can get a lot of details when people don't think you're listening to them, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do a lot of silent observing myself, and I agree. It makes for some great anecdotes that you can kind of practice over time. I think that what I'm really interested in, and look, I'm excited that you're coming on the Introverted Seller Summit as well, because I want to go deeper into this topic, and I think we could do a whole interview on, because I talk about like storytelling and how most people tell stories off the cuff, and my stories that I tell in business is so, I've really thought them through, and I've worked out what things people really enjoy and what people don't, and how to remove things and embellish on certain things to make them kind of theatrical masterpieces, right? So, and I think what I'm hearing is that you're applying that exact same strategy to the art of comedy, because you're doing the same thing. You're iterating and iterating the same story, as opposed, because you're doing it in different places, you're doing it with different customers. Right. And I really want to go deeper into that, because I think for the introverted sellers that are listening, and by the way, if you're a small business listening, if you're like, I think it was Peter Thiel that said, if your business consists of just you and your laptop, look around. If you don't see any salespeople, you're the salesperson, right? And
That's you.
Exactly right. So for a lot of people listening, if you think that you're not an introverted seller, you're wrong. You're an introverted seller in denial, perhaps, but you're definitely an introverted seller. So and for those people that haven't registered yet, and hopefully it hasn't passed, but it's on October 9. And if you're listening to this years later, it'll be in the introverted Introvert U platform, so it'll be available to watch there. But it's all free, so feel free to come and check that out at theintrovertedseller.com. But I'm going to ask one last question, because I'm tired of people talking about introversion as a disadvantage, because I believe it's like the reason I'm successful. And so I'm going to ask you just the straight out question, like, what do you consider your introvert's edge?
I think my introvert's edge is the ability to observe and to keenly observe life on a daily basis, because I think if you're on all the time and you're being the show all the time, no matter what business you're in, if you're on all the time, you're going to miss some subtle things that are happening around you with other people. But I find that to be an advantage because I'm introverted and I'm observing, and the observations in terms of my business in comedy is that the more detailed descriptions you can give of certain events, the funnier it is because people relate to it more. You give a really specific, detailed description of what's going on, whether it's a human experience or just something that happens day to day. So I find that the ability to be a detailed observer as an introvert is my introvert's edge.
Look, I think that's really powerful for people to hear, and a very different answer than a lot of people have said. I find the same. I mean, even in business, I see people that are financial controllers trying to inspire people around a KPI. Nobody cares. But if they've observed one person that was a customer that had a problem and they can tell that well, everybody can get behind it. And in sales, telling one story of one person that was struggling and their experience and their outcome, it's the details of the story that are about that person's human experience that makes the difference, not that the product was great and it worked. No one cares. And so I feel like most people would see that silent observer as a bad thing, right? I'm not part of it. And you're really saying, well, actually, no, not being part of it means that I can leverage it in the future. And I think that's really, really powerful. Karen, for people that have never heard of you before, which, is a lot harder now than it was, a few months ago. But for people that have never heard of you before, like, where would you suggest people, I know you do shows all over America and things like that as well. Where would you suggest people start? Is it your Instagram, your website? Where would they go?
I think if you go to my Instagram, which I mean, my website is KarenMorgan.com, and that's got all the socials there. And if you go to Instagram or any of the socials, it's Karen Morgan Comedy. But it's funny, as an introverted person, I even have trouble saying, find me here, but that's where you can find me, is generally KarenMorgan.com.
Yeah. Well, you'll find her because when you search her name, she's the only Karen Morgan comedy, but will show up, obviously. But also it's the one with the 185,000 followers. So, for those people that, because people are forever borrowing people's profile photos and their identities, don't do the one that if they find one that's a little bit less. But, I would really recommend people check it out. She if you enjoy laughing at your introversion, you'll get a kick out of it. And I think we all need to, right? Because when you have an advantage, then you're allowed to lean into it. Like if you see it as a disadvantage, you might not find it that funny. But if you see it as a true advantage, which I really hope at this point in this podcast you're starting to feel that way, definitely check it out. But Karen, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks.
Now, for those people that are enjoying today's episode, please make sure you take a second to post a review. Please take a second to subscribe because we've got some other amazing interviews that are coming out. And if you're listening to this before October 9th of 2023, make sure you go to the Introverted Sellers Summit because you're going to get the opportunity to see part 2 of Karen's interview, where we are going to be talking about some really, I think, interesting things about going deeper into the detail of story, as well as some of the advice she gives to new comics that go on stage. And I think it's going to be critical for perhaps those new sellers or pre-established sellers that perhaps feel a little bit of anxiety around the sales process. So we'll see you there. But for today, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Cheers. I'm Matthew Pollard, the author of The Introvert's Edge to Networking. I'm on a mission to help introverts to be proud of who we are. For the first time, you'll learn a process for networking that feels comfortable and authentic to you as an introvert. A process that doesn't feel salesy or awkward in any way.
I saw at least half of my board members, 3 in particular that I can think of, that now are so comfortable in literally going up to people at events. All of a sudden, I can see the confidence.
Most of the networking books and literature out there really focus on hardcore tactics designed for extroverts. As introverts, we're different, and we need to embrace that. We need a system that allows us to channel our natural introverted strengths into the networking room. You will learn how to be successful at face-to-face networking and a masterful online networker on your terms.
It's beautifully written and it provides tremendous value. So I am honored to say, folks, if you haven't looked at the book, you really need to check out this guy's book. It's excellent.
It gives you that confidence to truly be yourself, knowing that you're going to be presenting yourself in a way that is authentic and will also really resonate with the person that you're talking with.
One of the things you'll love about the Introvert's Edge to Networking is it's jam-packed full of more than 20 stories of introverts just like you. People that have likely started in much tougher spots than where you are right now, and how they've leveraged the strategies that you'll be learning to obtain phenomenal career and small business success.
I was about to give up on my business. The results started coming in right away. In fact, a year later, the Chamber of Commerce awarded me the Business of the Year.
You need to go read his book because everything he does is what people need, whether they're an introvert or not.
I've been fortunate to receive endorsements from some exceptional introverts like Neil Patel and Ivan Meisner, the founder of the world's largest networking group, BNI.
What I love about the Introvert's Edge is that it talks about the things that make an introvert successful.
The Introvert's Edge to Networking is going to destroy all of the barriers that you have around whether success in networking is possible for you.
Now I'm up to kind of 5 figures, triple my prices or more.
It was like the deals just kept coming in, and it was incredible. Like, I had never seen anything like it before.
I was able to triple my revenue, and that's happened within 6 months.
We've gone from 10 million a year to 20 million a year.
I wrote the Introvert's Edge to Networking after the success of the first in the Introvert's Edge series, which focused on sales. I decided that it was just as important, perhaps even more so, that we had a networking book that was designed to help us as introverts dominate in the networking room and in online networking, that was specifically written for us. So if you're an introvert, don't delay. Head to theintrovertsedge.com/networking to get access to the first chapter of my new book completely for free today.